Hello and welcome to Dungeoneered, a podcast dedicated to discussing Dungeons and Dragons. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Josh.
Let's do this. So, Josh, like always, I have absolutely no idea what we're talking about. Something about Mindflayers or something, but I don't know anything about them. So you're going to have to pretty much give me a basic layout on everything, because, like always, I'm clueless.
You really like these rambly beginnings. Yeah, I can talk about Mindflayers.
Hey, rambly beginnings are the best beginnings. You know, you just talk until you feel like you don't want to talk anymore.
Last week, I'm just going to say this for the people who listened. That beginning part was just horrible to edit.
What, the
It
part where you
sounds
laughed too
terrible when I
much?
released it, and I hated it, and I couldn't fix it.
The part where you laughed a lot, or what?
No, you said something, then you gave a long pause, and then you said the rest of the sentence, but you said it in a different tone of voice and whatnot, and so it has this very jarring, when I cut it closer together, very jarring feeling.
Listen here. Maybe it's because I'm secretly controlled by Mind Flayer.
I mean, aren't we all? Let's be honest.
That was a good transition.
If you're not these days,
that was
come
a good
on.
transition.
What are you doing?
Oh, man.
Okay, so Mindflayers. So last week we talked about the Aboleth. And this week we're talking about Mindflayers, or Illithids. Illithid is the technical term for them and what they want to be called. They're very interesting.
Are there multiple groups of are Illithid a species? It's not just Mind Flayers?
No, Illithid is it's like when you find a group of people and you're like, I'm going to call you this. And they're like, but we already have a name for ourselves. What are you talking about?
Yes. Classic English. That's what we do all the time.
Exactly. They're actually very interesting mirrors of each other. The Aboleth are from a time before recorded history. Their empire ruled over massive amounts of the world, while Mindflayers are from the far-flung future, where they had an immense empire and saw the destruction of the universe and traveled back in time.
Wait, what?
Exactly.
Wait, they saw the end of the universe, then traveled back in time?
Yeah, so they're from the distant future. The first Mind Flayer has not been born yet in Toril.
Then why are they evil? They saw the end of the universe.
Well,
and
they were evil up there. I mean, they were running an evil slave empire, destroying everything there, and then came back to conquer here.
They were like, yeah, the end of the world's not how we like it. We want to bring the end of the world. And so then they came back anyways to do that.
Yeah, so nice. We don't even know what the end of the world was. If it was just the universe was running out of resources, or the explosion of stars, or whatever it was, we don't know. But whatever it was scary enough to bring them back in time. They traveled back in time to get away from it.
I think it's the evil halfling empire, you know? They probably the whole world, and Mind Flayers had to flee and go back in time.
There is something about Mind Flayers that relates to halflings, but we're not there yet.
If you say that's because they're easier to eat, because they're smaller.
No, they're harder. That's
yeah, that's just because they're lucky.
Being from the future is why Aboleths were scared of them in the previous episode, because Aboleths know the origin of everything. And so that is why Mind Flayers seem to just come out of nowhere. Because they did. They weren't born here. They just all of a sudden showed up with huge armies. And so I think that would actually be a really cool event to see. Or to play out, is the party fighting through a dungeon, and they find a mad mage and he's doing all these experiments. And he creates the first Mind Flayer.
That would be wild. That'd be crazy.
And then they have to that Mind Flayer escapes and tries to build an empire. Meanwhile, finding that it already has allies on this world. And then it would be this really weird dynamic with that.
That could definitely be something interesting to kind of explore. I mean, like I said, I don't know anything about Mind Flayers, so I don't even know if you could create one.
I mean, we don't know. We don't know how they're born or what they came from. but we just know they haven't been born yet in Toril.
You just take a real big brain and you put it, in an octopus or something, and there you go.
And make it a
And then it
humanoid.
hatches the octopus
Just
onto a
make it a
human.
humanoid.
It's perfect.
Now, Mindflayers, or illithids, are powerful psionic humanoids that sustain themselves on a healthy diet of brains. Now,
If you're expecting me to comment, I'm not going to.
Now, they don't just eat brains for sustenance. Brains also provide the knowledge of that creature that they ate. So when your creature just got ate, like 2 sessions ago in our game, that Mind Flayer learned all your knowledge.
Wow, it's going to make him a whole lot dumber. Seamus is... He's a special boy.
Oh, man. Yeah, and so they use that insight to kind of learn about the world around them as well as sustaining them, because they only need 1 brain a month to survive and grow healthy. 1 brain a month, that's it.
I mean, you know what they say, a brain a month keeps the doctor away. I can't believe I just said that.
Sure. Now, they're actually near extinction in Toril now, and will fight to the death to protect any of the homes that they have now. Now, one of the weirdest things that I discovered is that Mind Flayers lay eggs.
Nice.
And it's not like a big egg or a small egg, like a chicken egg or anything. It's like little salmon eggs. You ever seen little salmon eggs?
Yeah, oh yeah.
It's like a whole bunch of those.
I just picture a bunch of Mind Flayers in like a hatchery, and people are just like collecting their eggs.
Well, what they do is they do it into
them.
a brine that is kind of in the middle of the community. And this brine is where the little eggs turn into tadpoles, to Mind Flayer tadpoles. And Mind Flayer tadpoles also live in the same environment as the thing that rules Mind Flayer society, the Elder Brain.
Ah, I know what an Elder Brain is, sort of, but I didn't know they were part of Mind Flayer Society or Illithid Society.
Oh yeah, they're the heads of the society. They're giant brains with tentacles and powerful psionics. Now, the tadpoles fight for survival in this brine, and the weak get eaten by the Elder Brain, leaving only the strongest alive. This process weeds out. It's only like 1 in 1,000 that actually survive this phase.
Wow, that's a rough life.
Now, for a tadpole to transform into a Mind Flayer as we know them, they need an intelligent humanoid host. Typically, this is done to slaves, which Mind Flayers have. The brain is actually eaten by the tadpole. Then the tadpole attaches to the spinal column and will eventually grow into a full Mind Flayer brain inside the now empty skull of that humanoid. This process is called ceramorphosis. If you want to see the horrifying process of ceramorphosis, look up the teaser trailer for the Baldur's Gate 3 game, because that is the first time I've seen it digitally rendered. It is horrifying and gross and terrible, but also very interesting.
That's wild. That's crazy. They kill humans and then put their little eggs inside, like a tadpole inside their
So what
brain.
it does is they put it on its face, and it decides either it crawls in through their eye or it crawls in through their ear, which is horrifying.
Ah, I'll take the ear? Question mark.
It is believed that certain races are actually immune to this transformation, and some are just not compatible with it. It wouldn't work on them.
Hey, halflings.
Of course, this list includes halflings, but it also has giants, Kuatoa, which are like fish people, centaurs, dwarves, Duragar, and gnomes.
Oh, gnomes are on the list.
Yeah,
that's like the halfling ultimate competitor.
No,
they're really not.
For this process, they believe that if a creature is too big or too small, then either the tadpole will take too long to finish the brain or finish too quickly and not have enough sustenance. Either way, both the humanoid and the tadpole would die, and it would be a waste.
So what you're saying is halfling brains are too small.
Possibly. That could be one of the reasons.
I see. That doesn't mean they're stupid, though, because gnomes are smart.
But not halflings. Tadpoles are also inserted into other monsters to test what will happen. This can be a lot of fun to like play with as a DM to like just take a monster that maybe your group has come across multiple times, or one that you just really like and want to throw in your game, and have them meet this weird transformed version of it that looks kind of Mind Flayer like with all these tentacles, and you could come up with some fun new monsters that way.
I just pictured a rhinoceros, but instead of a horn, it just has like tentacles that droop down its face. Don't know why.
I would not put it past Wizards of the Coast to make that.
Could you just imagine like a rhinoceros charging at you with like tentacles?
That was a gross noise, but gross.
Got my bird excited.
He wants those tentacles. They're good. They're like worms to him.
True.
So I'm not going to go into all the details on every single one of these illithid creations, but I've picked a few that I want to talk about that are gross and weird and awesome. Now we're going to start with the basic one that most people know about. It's called a Mind Witness. Now the Mind Witness is a beholder that has undergone seramorphosis. Half of the eye stalks of the beholder turn into tentacles, and its eyes slightly change and kind of take on more of a pearlescent hue to them. It also loses its anti-magic eye, and its intelligence drops a lot, but it gains an immense devotion and love for Mind Flayers.
So it just makes the beholder worse.
Yes, but it also makes it subservient to them, so there's upsides to it.
True.
Now, earlier I said that gnomes are believed to be unable to be infected with tadpole. That's only partially true. Deep gnomes, with the assistance of a dark magic ritual, have been transformed into these horrible bug monsters called Mozgrikin.
I see the picture that in here.
Yeah, they're incredible at stealth, but are despised by Mind Flayers. They're used a lot by Mind Flayers, but they're also despised by them because they are of their horrifying appearance and imperfections.
I want to play one as a player character.
A deep gnome that sort of has some of its sentience left.
Yeah, like one that resisted the effects, but still went under transformation, and is now like this horrible outcast. It'd be fun.
That would certainly be something. My
origami wizard figured it out now.
Now, one of the best is called the Europhion. They were originally ropers.
Yeah.
Ropers are powerful stalagmite-like creatures that use their tentacles from 50 feet away to grapple you and restrain you and deal immense damage. And with the seramorphosis, they become powerful psionic wielders, and whenever they hit you, they have a high chance to stun. They are very deadly, and they can stun like 4 people around from 50 feet away. It's crazy. There's also ones called mind worms. Little is known of the origin of mind worms, but people believe it is a combination of a purple worm and a tadpole.
It just sounds like a horrible. Yeah, I got mind worms.
With a darker... I mean, it's huge. I mean, you know purple worms are insanely big. They're just as big.
You would know that you had mind worms. Jeez.
So these creatures, mind worms, are horrifying, and they could also be really fun. There's really fun opportunities with them because they create things called probe worms. And these little worms that they create can travel like infinite distance away, even onto other planes. And they latch on and kind of absorb the energy of a person, kind of like a leech of sorts. And if they have enough time on you, they teleport you directly into the stomach of the mind worm.
That is terrible.
Yeah, it doesn't matter where you are, what dimension you're in, doesn't matter. If they have enough time, you're getting teleported into that mind worm stomach. And that could be miles away from your party. It is almost always a death sentence.
Dang, that is messed up.
Now, my idea for this that would be interesting but also very dangerous is having like your party go into a city and all of a sudden people start disappearing and you're called in to investigate and you keep finding these dead little red worms in all the houses and you kind of have to figure it out and do research and find what these are and it would just be an interesting encounter or I can't think of the word right now.
It's a
Mission?
little bit of a murder mystery.
Yeah, kind of murder mystery.
Just sort of like mystery. Yeah,
Yeah, it would be
that'd be
fun.
fun.
Now, I'm sure you're all expecting this because it's Dungeons and
Nope.
Dragons. So, of course, the Mindflayers did not leave out dragons when they tried to seramorphize monsters. They created something with a very uncreative name called a Brain Stealer Dragon.
Yes.
The scariest thing about these creatures is not the powerful tentacles they gain or the creepiness of their appearance. It is they get an insane boost to their already high intelligence. They become so intelligent and conniving and malicious that they have even been known to take over when, like, if something happens to the elder brain or there's no like leader for a mind flayer colony, they are smart enough that they can work their way, even being a creation of a mind flayer, into running the mind flayer society.
Yeah, these things are creepy looking.
Now, whenever these tadpoles reach maturity, they're used for all these different experiments and all these different things. And the reason for that is because mind flayers fear what they become if you let them keep growing. If they grow past a certain amount of inches, they are immediately killed by the mind flayers because they are horrified by what it could become.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense to me.
They're
Get rid of
called
this thing.
they're called a neothalid, and these creatures are just as malicious and hungry as mind flayers and all these creations they have are that love to eat brains like they do. But these things are morons. They have so low intelligence that the psychic abilities and the main power of mind flayers just doesn't work on them. And that scares mind flayers so much.
They created something too dumb that it's scary.
It's too dumb that they can't hurt it with psychic powers. Now,
That's so funny.
if they encounter, like, if they hear rumors of one nearby, they will send like hunting parties after it. They like will not let it live. They will kill it as fast as possible before it gets too big. Now, when they traveled to our world, to our timeline, they built their armies again. They built their empire again, or at least tried to. It wasn't the same and it wasn't as big, but they built it. Now, little is known of their empire from the future, other than it was massive and powerful. But before I can explain their conquest on Toril and our current timeline, I have to explain a little bit about the planes. In D&D, the planes are arranged in a physical way, where there are the inner planes, like the different elemental planes, the Feywild, Shadowfell, and the material plane, of course. Then there are the outer planes, which are oriented based on their alignment. On the top, the upper planes are good planes. The lower planes are the evil planes. The ones on the left planes are planes of law. The right is planes of chaos. Before the Mind Flayers left their world, their timeline, they had a powerful empire with powerful ships called nautiloids. They have used these ships to cross planes, and they use them to travel back in time. These nautiloids are so advanced that it gave them such an upper hand that they were able to take over all of the inner planes. So all the elemental planes, the Shadowfell, the Feywild, and the material plane, and a lot of the astral sea. That was how large their empire became.
Wow. Jeez.
Yeah. And if you want to see a really cool, I keep mentioning Baldur's Gate 3, but that's just because it's an amazing D&D video game, and they keep animating things that I love. So
Like eating brains. Nice.
No, the nautiloids. So these ships, they kind of look like snail shells with these tentacles coming out of them. And they look so cool and so well animated in the trailers for Baldur's Gate 3. It's so cool.
Yeah, I've never been a fan of nautiloid ships. To me, they just look like giant snails that fly.
Oh, like if you look at like the old art, it definitely looks like that and looks silly. But the way that they did it in Baldur's Gate 3 trailer looks so cool. And the way that they can have the whole like inner of the ship working if you play some of the game actually. You're in it for a bit, you kind of like see how it works inside, and it just feels right. It feels mind flayery. It all just works beautifully.
Yeah, I mean, the art that I see on the internet is literally just like a snail with tentacles
Well, I
that
mean,
flies.
nautiloid, I didn't know this, but nautiloid until I researched it. Nautiloids are actual like fossils that we found.
Yeah, yeah, they are.
Yeah. And so they literally based it like 1-to-1 off of that design. Now, during this time of taking over all of the inner planes in the astral sea, they were consuming world after world after world, eating and procreating all of its humanoid inhabitants. And this allowed them to grow to immense strength and gain immense knowledge. But just like the Abelis, their empire were destroyed by by slaves. The slave revolt for the Mind Flayers were the Gith.
Ah,
The Gith had been Mind Flayer thralls for so long that they even forgot what their race was called. The Gith are named Gith because a person named Gith, the female leader that kind of like helped lead this revolt, that's why they named themselves after her. And once they had freed themselves from the Mind Flayers, which they kind of didn't explain how they got the upper hand and how they were able to defeat them, but they were. And when they did, half of them were like, "Okay, we're free. Let's go live in peace. Let's find a place that they can't get us." And then the other half were like, "No, no, 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 no. We got to crush them. Make sure they never come back." And they kind of split off into the two groups, Gith Sarai and Gith Yankee. Now, the Githyanki, they are the ones that then were led by the same person who freed them, Gith. She kept leading the Githyanki. And they went and they crushed like every Mind Flayer enclave or fortress or just any place of power for the Mind Flayers. They crushed it and destroyed, leaving as little as possible.
and only half did that because the other half left.
Yeah. Now, under this heavy persecution, the Mind Flayers ran into the Underdark, where they are today. The Underdark protects them from the rest of the retribution of the Githyanki, even though some of them still explore down there to try and destroy as many Mind Flayers as possible. But they continue to grow in strength every day, and they hope to once again rule in a powerful empire like they did in the old days, and like they know, even though they don't live forever, they know of the empire to come.
That's ominous.
Yeah. So, Aaron, I was thinking we could focus more on a specific topic after last week we kind of rambled a bit. And so the idea of building an empire like the Mind Flayers had, and kind of just thinking how to homebrew that and how to think of that and make it real. So my first thought would be for us to think about, and maybe even use a lot of the stuff we learned, is how does a empire become all powerful like that? They have to have something that gives them the edge. So what are some things that could be used to give an empire the edge if you wanted to create this all massive empire?
Well, the first thing that kind of instantly pops up into my mind would be like an all-knowing type thing where like even like your PCs or like your like normal humanoids can like feel this sense of something is watching or something is observing them. So like if you were to play a D&D game, even with planes or planets type thing, there's something that is actively observing and watching like their plane and their planet, and always have this kind of sense in the back of people's mind to help give like a to help give an awareness to what this empire is, but then also give that empire immense power for them like observing. So if you know that this empire is watching you, that already gives like this huge immense power to something that people wouldn't necessarily either A, know about, B, want to know about, um, or even like C, giving something your players can interact with. So this like overwhelming sense that there is something that knows what you're doing.
I really
Um,
liked how you did it in your game for that kind of a thing. How you had the Empire. What were they called?
yeah, so I have an empire in my game that's a hive mind. So they have an official name. They're called Tiris, and they're a hive mind essentially. But they kind of go by the Dynasty in my game, and the Dynasty
Dynasty.
has like
That's what it
this.
was.
Yeah, the Dynasty have their leader is an all-knowing. He's called the all-knowing Emperor, and he knows all the collective knowledge of everybody in the Empire, because they're a hive mind, and so he can distribute that information to people that he wants. And then it gives this overwhelming sense of when the players meet him or can hear him in their minds, he can overwhelm them with this sense of knowledge. And he can essentially read their mind, I guess you would say, like learn the knowledge they have in their mind. And that just kind of immediately puts at least my players on edge because they don't like it when their mind is read. So,
Yeah.
especially without like their consent. So, like, immediately that, like, kind of puts them on the back burner of like, we don't like this guy at all. He's terrible and evil.
Yeah, I was
So
particularly
yeah, that's
thinking
kind of how
about
the dynasty does it.
the way that you had the Dynasty, that they kind of are unique in their physiology and how they were able to take on like the shapes of the coins and whatnot, and he was able to have eyes pretty much in your pocket if you didn't know that it was a Dynasty coin.
Yeah, so how they reproduce is they corrupt living beings, and they were experimenting, kind of like the mind flayers. They're experimenting with corrupting non-living objects, and so they started to be able to corrupt non-living objects, and then essentially they became spies. So they would like corrupt your money, and you would literally have a dynasty member in your money, listening to your conversations, listening to things you were talking about, that kind of stuff, or like on your sword.
Yeah, Matt
So, and the
Colville
only way
talked
that
about
that can be removed.
a these red coins that he started to give to, like, they started to come across his players, and like he had this whole really cool encounter where they first meet this dude, and whenever somebody died around these red coins, this person who was looking for dead bodies to kind of like use in experiments would just show up because they were killed around these red coins. He knows. And so it's this horrifying figure where he gives you more red coins for these dead bodies. And eventually the players started to figure out, oh, that's what it is. That's what's causing this. But it's this kind of feeling of, oh no, is he going to show up? Is he going to show up? And then, yeah, you're getting paid, but you don't want to help this dude. He's the bad guy, but he's also way more powerful than you. And like your dynasty leader, there's just this feeling of knowledge and immense power that you're like, I can't, we're too low level. We can't stand up against this person.
Yeah, my party had a very similar moment because the dynasty in my campaign was introduced like very, very early, but subtly. So they were kind of introduced probably by well, technically session one, but they were introduced very early just to get this kind of, oh yeah, like type of moment later in the campaign. But about halfway through the campaign, they ended up they were essentially trying to defeat what are pretty much called great hearts, which are parts of the dynasty that corrupt cities. So they would grow these huge beings underneath a city in order to corrupt the entire thing and destroy it. And so the party found out that if they were to get the heart before it could grow, they could stop the corruption from happening. And so when they first went to go fight one of these hearts, they found essentially, along with the heart, this like massive sludge, and a ton of like coins and random objects that were kind of around it. And they kind of eventually, with those kind of clues, pieced together that they were trying to corrupt everyday items. And so they ended up like finding these everyday items that they had on their person that were corrupted. And so that was kind of a cool moment.
Yeah, that is cool. Now, what would an empire do if they had this immense knowledge? How would they use that to their advantage?
Well, if I use my campaign, they're pretty much trying to take over the world to save the world, if that makes sense.
Could you elaborate?
Yeah. So, for example, because they're all knowing, because the all knowing emperor knows like everything, he knows that there is a demise that is setting upon the material plane that is coming to destroy all planes. And he's trying to unite everybody under his sole empire, his like single hive mind, so that they can all become unified and fight this force that's coming. So that introduces this whole like, well, do the players want to kill this guy because he's actually trying to stop the real bad guy, but he's also a terrible person because he's like corrupting human flesh. Like he's like actively enslaving people essentially and forcing them into his hive mind. So it's created this like, what do we do about this whole thing?
Yeah, that was I remember I told you about this. Fable 3 had that kind of a thing, and spoilers if you haven't played Fable 3 yet, but it's been out a while, so but your brother is this evil king, and you're kind of like, what are you doing and whatnot, and eventually you have to escape because he's trying to kill you. And when you come back, you're able to overthrow him and finally live up to all these promises you made along the game of, oh yeah, I'll lower your taxes, I'll treat you well and do all these things. And you realize, and he even tells you, is he wasn't doing this to be evil. He was doing this because he needed a certain amount of money to make sure he had enough troops and enough supplies to save everyone. And yeah, everyone hated him, but it was the only solution he could see to save them. And so you kind of have to decide is how do you want to do this? Do you want to continue the same way your brother did, where yes, you'll have enough money to save everyone, but everyone's going to hate you and you're going to be a tyrant? Or do you find some other way to succeed? Which, if you hold all your, if you do all your promises and lower taxes and all these things, you visibly watch as your gold gets smaller and smaller and smaller, so you have like nothing left, and then you have to use all of like your own money if you want to save as many people as you can.
Yeah, I like that kind of dynamic because it like, yes, there's an evil in front of you, but there's also like this worse evil that's behind it. And so it kind of creates this huge dilemma for especially player characters. Like, what do we do? So my players are currently trying to make peace with the dynasty and like stop them from corrupting, but then join forces to defeat this evil. So they're currently planning like a whole peace, like this whole peace talks that are overseen by another nation. So that's kind of where my campaign's headed.
Nice. That's kind of where mine's at right now. There was this oncoming war between certain. My world splits gods and primordials and has all the very complex stuff, but the primordials are the main rulers main gods on the continent that they are currently having their campaign, and there are some like demigods and whatnot that are still allowed on this continent. And one of the demigods, well, one of the what do they call them? Not the minor gods. So it's not as powerful. It's not as weak as a demigod, but not as powerful as a major god. They are working with two primordials to kind of help bring change to the world. And the only way they saw of doing it was this all-out war that was going to have to happen. And then there was the other group, which just wanted things to continue the way they are. And so they're currently working on getting the two groups together for peace talks instead of choosing a side, as that was what they wanted to do. And I love when players do that, where they're like, why don't we just work for peace? Why don't we try? Why does it have to be A or B? Let's find another way.
Yeah, that's kind of what my players have done. And it's interesting because I'm still not, as a dungeon master, 100% sure how the dynasty is going to take peace talks. Because they're very firm in their belief that they're the best way to stop this incoming doom, essentially. So
yeah.
I'm not sure what's going to happen.
Yeah, with my group, if any of you are listening, this is spoilers, so don't keep listening. They were unsure. They were really like, because they understand the meta side of it, and they're like, oh, it's like, is this okay? Is this going to destroy the big bad of your campaign and make it all kind of not work? And I was like, no, I got this. Because one of the gods of the minor god, they are actually trying to start a war. They had this whole fake idea of peace that they were promoting and getting a group together to help them, but in reality, they wanted to weaken all the primordials so that they could be the top dog of this continent now. And so they're really mad that the group is now working against that. And one of the group is actually their son. And so there's this whole dynamic of him trying to get the party on his side, but also not realizing that they're good people and they're not gonna go for his evil plan. And so he's gonna be the big bad in the end of he's gonna rage when they do build peace, because both sides want peace except for him.
Yeah. And that is kind of how my campaign is playing out, is that the dynasty, they don't want to fight or be peace, but they want to corrupt everybody peacefully. So like, let us just do our thing and take over, don't fight us with this because we're the best possible way.
Yeah.
but they understand the problem that is coming. So it's interesting to see what's going to happen for sure.
Yeah.
But with kind of making this empire, I also thought about like maybe switching alignments up a little bit from mind flayers. So they were once like really terrible and really evil, but because they gained so much vast knowledge and are aware of something greater than themselves, like an impending doom, they are now coming as these like not what fortune tellers, I guess you could say, like the remnants of a shattered empire, or like they're coming as like the forewarning to this evil that's happened, which would be kind of a fun way to play it out too.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea with the idea of mind flayers being kind of seeing something that is so frightening to them that they have to get assistance with it. That's actually really cool. I would want them to not be so different from classic mind flayers. I would want them to be the same, but just have that fear. That's the one thing keeping them good quotation marks or allies at least
Yeah,
is
yeah.
that thing.
You could also play it as you could do something different where like they're now invading your plane to take all of its resources so that they can fight whatever is coming, and that could be another interesting way you could use it too. Or like these mind flayers start an
Yeah, they
invasion
come to
essentially.
consume and learn all the knowledge of your planet for the ability to fight this thing.
Right. So this ancient mind flayer empire comes to invade and take over your planet for its knowledge and its resources in order to fight and try to save the galaxy or whatever, or the planes, anything like that would be really fun to play too.
Yeah, they would.
Then it would like there'd be an immediate threat of mind players attacking, but then also in the background, you're still partially aware of something worse.
Now, with the Mind Flayer Empire attacking, what's something that could be like the worst thing?
What do you mean, like its leader?
No, I mean like the what they're scared of. What can we think of that would scare a Mind Flayer so much?
I mean, the best thing I could think of would be something like Hadar, like changing some sort of ancient god or ancient entity
Yeah.
and putting it in your campaign.
Yeah, that would be a good
I
one.
mean,
Yeah, Hadar
that
is a
could be, yeah, that would just be that'd be the first thing that I would think of is like changing that. I mean, you could make it another empire if you wanted, but that might get too empire-y, like
yeah.
we're running from an empire.
If I was going to choose, I would probably do an Atropole, which is something you probably don't know of.
Nope.
It is like a deceased god that died when it was still a fetus.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, they're horrifying. They look so gross and so terrible. It was in Tomb of Annihilation. Spoilers if you're playing that, I guess. The main villain of that has his staff that he's using to draw the life essence out of anybody who's been revived, the soulmonger, and he's using this powerful staff to try and like feed and grow and reinvigorate this Atropole, which has been drifting in the astral sea for years and years and years and years and years.
Yes, yeah, that could be a really fun thing to do. Essentially, that'd be a super fun idea too.
Yeah.
You could also do like a classic like demons are coming type thing if you wanted to, or
Yeah, it's a good one.
I
I mean, there's some
yeah,
fun demons to play with too.
right. So like you could do that. You could do all sorts of different stuff, but anything that mind flayers. Illithids in at least in 5e, they're only like a challenge rating 7, so like they're not like super strong in the game, anyways.
Well, yeah, but you also got to think that they have these brain stealer dragons and they have these mind witnesses and all these creations they can make. It's pretty easy to level them up to a
Hey,
hard encounter for high level parties.
that would be fun. They created something so evil and so powerful that they have to run away from it, and now it's coming to consume
That's beautiful.
the other world. So they created like the ultimate brain stealer dragon or whatever, like something so terrifying that even they have to run from it now.
They combined it, which maybe we combine the ideas and do like they combined it with an Atropole or something they found in the
Right.
astral sea that
How they like
then
captured a
created
god,
this
and
god. Oh my!
yeah,
They
they
combine it with an
captured a
Atropole
god
and they
and
literally make Cthulhu.
Yeah, exactly.
They
Right. And now
literally
Cthulhu
just
is coming
make
to your world.
Cthulhu, and they're like, crap. What did we just do?
Yeah, and now they're running from it, or they're trying to invade your plane to get knowledge and resources to try and turn and fight it. Either of those would work really well.
Yeah, it is good. That's good.
That would for sure definitely give you a sense of something ominous is coming in the background, especially if they were to like inform you that, you know, something has been created that they can't deal with or destroy.
Now, it would be really interesting if, like, early on in your campaign, you're doing like they're doing small stuff, so that it's way before like the mind flayers actually start attacking, or before they start even hearing about that type of stuff. They're doing all this stuff to help people and whatnot, and maybe they get an underwater mission, or they get a mission to some other like group of monsters or whatnot, and they either meet like the aboleth, or they meet some powerful group, and they arrive there. And there's a bunch of mind flayers there talking with the group.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, just
You could
like
have some interesting encounters to kind of build the suspense of, this is not how mind flayers work. What's going on?
I mean, you could even like play with the idea of like nautiloid spaceships, and they see some sort of figure way up in the sky, like early in the campaign or something, but they just couldn't quite like it looked like something with tentacles that was like flying through the sky. You could even do something like that that was just like a hint, like what the heck
Yeah,
was that? But they couldn't see what it was, or like
yeah.
anything like that.
It's the hard thing with some campaigns is like the moment you point anything out like that, where you're not just like, you don't describe the sky every time. Today you are. It's like very obvious that there's something there that,
Yeah, but then you just shelve it for like 30 sessions, like you just shelve it for a very long time and never come back to it.
yeah,
All their research becomes dead ends. You just like start occupying them with other things that they need to be doing. And then all of a sudden bring it back and they're like, wait, we saw that at the very beginning,
yeah,
Because that's something similar that I did in my campaign. But and
yeah.
that
You had
also
that
kind of
fun
like,
jousting tournament.
yeah, that was also
That
early
didn't
too, where they
that
fought a
didn't end
dynasty
out
member
how
in a
you thought it
jousting
would.
tournament. Yeah, yeah. They fought a dynasty member in a jousting tournament.
Was it
One
like the
of the
king
spies who was like
or like Prince? It
he
was
was
like a
one.
high
He was
level.
so yeah. So in the dynasty, there are people called princes. There's three of them, and they're not actually princes. It's just their title. They're just like high ranking members of the dynasty. They're just like these powerful warriors. And one of my players, my knight, he was entering a jousting tournament and he scored a natural 20 on the joust, the final point. And if you know anything about jousting rules, if you knock your opponent off their horse, then you get their armor or their horse. So he knocked, and he ended up knocking him off his horse with a natural 20, and he beat. So essentially, how I had the rule set is that if your number was a certain number higher than the number they rolled to joust you, um, then you would have to roll like saving throws and stuff. And so he rolled a saving throw and rolled awful for it and fell off his horse. And so he got his armor at the very beginning of the game. And that's been like a whole theme. Like this guy, the Black Prince is what he's called. They've been chasing him and following him for the entire campaign since that joust.
And they got that in their first meeting with him. They got the
Yeah. And
upper
then,
hand, which is
yeah.
crazy. And
Well, and how
also, it
that
creates
turned
a
out.
really interesting dynamic that most campaigns stay away from, is where it's like most times it's like the enemy gets the upper hand in the first battle, and that kind of leads this whole thing. But in that, it's they got the upper hand, and then they realize, oh wait, he's bad.
Yeah. So that shortly led to them that formed this. They hated each other. They essentially became rivals, right? And like a few sessions later, they moved to this town called Junction, which is essentially this like tent city of traders, like just a huge market city. Essentially, is what it is. Just everybody from it's where all the trade routes kind of connect together to go to different cities, and they have formed this permanent market. They found the Black Prince buying slaves because the dynasty was buying slaves to corrupt and turn them into dynasty members to get an initial like foothold. And so they found him buying slaves. And so they entered this huge bidding war with the Black Prince to try and buy the slaves that he was trying to buy. And he was trying to buy essentially baby gods. There were these two figures, which they ended up saving, that were, I mean, not baby gods. They're kind of like Asimar, but I don't remember their exact title in D&D. But anyways, that's irrelevant. But they ended up like in this huge bidding war with him. And so they ended up beating him again, but he escaped. Anyways, but it was just like it's just a fun thing to have that reoccurring villain just pop in, and then all of a sudden it expands to this huge, greater empire that they had no idea even existed.
Yeah, that was I enjoyed hearing about that when you first talked about that.
It's been a wild ride.
It really has where you're at now. Now, for an empire, an important part to think about is hierarchy, which yours has that really interesting hierarchy of the guy in charge is the one who knows everything. So there's pretty much never going to be any sort of uprising or problem with his servants or his people because he has all of the power.
Yeah. I mean, not only does he have all the power, but he has the ability to like see through other people's eyes. So because he's a hive mind, he can tap into their senses and see what they're seeing. So if he knows, for example, the Black Prince is going to be fighting the party, he can watch the fight through the Black Prince's eyes and gain knowledge that way as well. So he can like tap in and enter into this like sensory state to oversee his hive mind. So it makes him even more deadly.
Yeah.
But it also, I wanted to create an empire that the players felt like they could defeat, because it can be really daunting for players to be like, oh, there's this huge empire that we have to defeat. How are we going to defeat it? But because I made it a hive mind, if they're able to destroy the leader, the hive mind crumbles and dies. So it gave them a direct goal in going to find the leader of the hive mind and kill him.
Yeah.
And so how I did that is essentially all the previous hive mind leaders had, when they die, their heart turns into what is a great heart, which is how they corrupt cities. And if you go and collect all the great hearts, you can turn it into a weapon, I guess you would say, that is needed to kill the current leader of the hive mind. So they have to find all these items first, then go and kill the hive mind.
Oh, interesting. What heart level are they at now?
They're level 16 right now.
I was meaning like heart, like how many hearts have they gathered?
Yeah, they're on 2 of 4.
Nice.
And with each heart, so how it works is with each heart that you get, so essentially when you first get a heart, you have this overwhelming urge to crush it, because when you crush it, you gain part of its strength. So you can up like ability scores when you crush it. The problem is if you crush it, you can no longer create that weapon. So they have to fight this urge to not crush it and gain its power. And so they have to make like wisdom saving throws every once in a while. And the more hearts you get, the more the urge increases to crush the heart.
So wait, what happens if they crush one of these hearts?
So if they crush a heart, they can no longer form the weapon needed to create to kill the leader. And so then what they have to do is they have to go and kill like the Birth Queen and his like lower groups, and then essentially capture the leader of the dynasty and have him like essentially disband the hive mind. So they can still do it. It's just a roundabout way.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to become more creative than we're just going to go grab these and go and kill them. It is now like, well, shoot, we crushed these hearts. Now we have to figure out a new way to destroy the hive mind. And so the hive mind has one massive central heart that controls the all-knowing emperor, essentially. So it's the souls of everybody within in the hive mind that he's directly connected to. And if they kill that and destroy that, then he's also dead. So, yep.
That's cool. And it's nice that there's that's something that many new DMs are should be aware of, is that when you're creating something like that, where they have to create this weapon to destroy this thing, there's always a chance that the players will fail. You're rolling dice, you're having issues, there's always a chance. Always think of some secondary way they could accomplish their goal.
Yep. So if they kill the souls of the hive, essentially, which is what the all-knowing emperor is guarding, then the hive itself dies, but the all-knowing emperor remains. So they would have to like capture him and keep him in prison or something. So he wouldn't be able to be killed, but they could still succeed in their mission of destroying the empire. They would also have to destroy what's called the birthing queen, and she's like the main queen of how they reproduce. So kind of like an ant, essentially. She's the main queen of how they like corrupt things and reproduce. So the dynasty has 2 ways of corrupting. It's either through living flesh or non-living flesh. So they can essentially take dead things and revive it with their corruption, or they can take living things and turn it into themselves. So they have to kill the birthing queen, who can birth and create new creatures out of non-living flesh. So just add another step, but still doable.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's crazy. I have
And
a lot of
it,
it. It's a huge document of the dynasty. They're a massive,
it's nice that
huge
I
thing.
mean, like you just took from nature there, kind of that
Yeah.
the
Yep.
hive queen, the ant queen, they're required for procreation and whatnot. And
Yeah, that's partially how it started. I wanted to make a hive that was reliant on like essentially this singular queen that would like birth and create different like mini queens. Like so, there's the dynasty. It would take forever to get into, but the dynasty has these creatures that go out and corrupt living flesh and bring dead flesh back to the queen. So the queen, she only converts dead flesh, but she has these little like not minions, but princesses, I guess you would say, that go out and like collect and also corrupt living flesh. So you have to kill all of those to destroy the hive if you didn't kill the king. So yeah,
that's an interesting, yeah, yeah. It's that's a beautiful way of creating things. Is just look at something in nature or something that you like, some hierarchical structure or something, and being like, I want to create something around that, and then just let it build, kind of snowball it from there, and you can come up with some amazingly intricate things that just started as, hey, I like how this works.
yeah, that's literally how they started. Was I was like, I want to make literally an insect hive, but I don't want them to be insectoids. I just want them to be like, like mysterious figures. And so I ended up coming up with this whole like they're obsidian skinned, because their skin, their whole entire body is made of like this sludge, this corrupt sludge that they essentially place into living and non-living flesh to corrupt it. And so when you kill them, you never kill them fully. They turn into this like pile of sludge that can move, and so you have to like kill it with radiant energy in order to get rid of it totally. So that's been a fun thing for the party to learn. Also, is like the first time they killed the Black Prince, he got away because he melted into like this sludge, and he escaped because they didn't know about it until they found him again later on. They're like, "Why are you alive?" So yeah, it was a really fun way of doing things.
Yeah, I really like looking at other things. There are a lot of, whether it's hobbies or different other tasks that you have to complete or things that you do where they have kind of a refined way of, this is how you start, this is the middle, this is the end. And one of the nice things about world creation is it doesn't have to be that way. Like there is no, you have to start with an empire, you have to start with this. You can start anywhere, and if you try to start with a whole bunch, like it gets overwhelming quickly. And so just starting with, like, I started with, I really like giants. They're not really that many of them in D&D.
That's so
What
funny.
if
I started
what
with
if there was
halfling.
a what if there was a main, like, what if one of the continents that was the main inhabitants were giants? And so I did that. And then I thought, why does this continent have giants instead of humans? Like, why did the gods make giants here? And I was like, what if it wasn't the gods? What if it was something else? And so then I created these primordials, and then I thought, who are these primordials in relation to the gods? And then it just builds and builds and builds from there. And you don't have to know everything or start in the same place as everybody else. There's so many places you can start that then just snowball into whole huge things.
Well, yeah, my campaign started with halflings. So essentially, the
Of
dynasty
course
had
it
been
did.
working.
Of
It
course it
did. I
did.
know. I know. I know. I'm so proud of it. But my campaign
I think
started
that
with a
was the
group of halflings.
first. I think that, hold on, I just got to point out, we're nearly done with the recording. I think that was the first chirp I've heard.
Yeah, she's been eating. She's been eating her favorite
She's a
treats.
good girl. She's been a very
Good
good
old
girl.
Nutriberries. Yeah. But I started with a group of halflings that had been corrupted because they went insane because the dynasty had infiltrated the nation of Astol, which is the nation they started in, and some high-ranking members of Astol were developing this spell to mind control people to give them to the dynasty. But the ancient magic spell that they were developing failed and created this group of halflings that became cannibals and insane. And they were exiled and forced to. They didn't want to like murder them or kill them because they didn't know, first of all, that they were cannibals, but they were like, we just need to hide it and cover up our mistake. So they exiled them from the city, and they went out into the country and became these cannibal halflings. And that's where my game started with them killing these cannibal halflings. And it all tied into the main campaign. But it just started with that one little group in a tiny little town.
That's another thing. The idea of having the very first enemy or like the level 1 adventure somehow tying into the rest of the world in a really cool way. Like Matt Kova had a really good idea, which I used in my first campaign, is that if there are a bunch of these, not now, but maybe could be big bad evil guys, all these people that are level 1 adventures that are trying to be these huge empires or whatever, they all are trying to build connections, same as any political group is. Like, you try to build these friendships and build these allies. And so he suggested in your first adventure, have whoever the boss is, like in whatever his library is or his room or whatever, have like notes or letters from other, or even documentation about, like, maybe he met them and he just kind of wrote a little thing about, I don't trust this person or whatever. And just having these little connection points to other stories in your world. It doesn't even have to like tell the party where to go, or even if you don't have it like fully fleshed out, it doesn't even have to like say that much. But just having it all have this living, breathing feeling by connecting it together really helps with immersion and creating this really cool world.
Yeah, with the halflings, they ended up. So the guy who was in charge was called Brabus Applebottom. So he was like the head. He was the head of the clan.
That is
essentially,
a
of these
very halfling name.
Yeah, and so he was this like, because of the insanity, he ended up consuming and eating so much food that he became huge. So he became like almost as tall as a giant and like really fat, and he couldn't move. And essentially he was the main boss they had to fight at level 1 or level 2. But when they killed him, after they killed him and his group, they found like a journal written by him. So it started off by this, essentially these writings about a normal halfling who grew up in Haran, which is like the capital city. And essentially he came under the effects of this like insanity spell that slowly turned him mad. And so the writings of his journal went from like being normal, like just like everyday life as like this noble family, and then slowly going insane over time. So the party could like read and see how he went in like his descent into madness, essentially.
I
And
just
so
love
that
those journals.
immediately,
Those
what?
descent into madness journals. I love those.
I know, yeah, they're amazing. And so like with the descent into madness journals, essentially they were able to like connect like 40 sessions later that Estol has been putting people under this insanity spell to like gain and control their mind in order to give them to the Dynasty, because the Dynasty had infiltrated the government of Estol. So they were essentially mind controlling people to give them to the Dynasty. And so that's how I introduced this massive empire just with like a small journal of an insane halfling who didn't get mind controlled, and the spell had failed because it was in its original developing stages.
Yeah, that's yeah. That's good. That's good. Well,
Yeah, really fun.
well, this has been a good episode of Dungeoneered, and I look forward to editing it. I'm gonna try some new techniques, so you might hear that this episode is gonna sound different than the ones before it. Hopefully, it sounds better. If it sounds terrible, hit us up on Twitter to let us know. I think it's gonna sound better, but we'll see.
Less parrot, less
Yeah,
bird.
a lot less parrot. Now, thank you for listening. See you next time.
Am I supposed to say something? Yeah.
Normally,
Bye.
yeah.
See
Okay,
ya.
that works. That works.